Hi, folks. Thanks so much for stopping in for this next episode of Apples and Oranges. I'm Dr. Doug, and today we're going to be talking about remembering the point of why you're in that relationship or at that workplace. Before we get into it, if you could, please, down below, leave a comment about what it was about this topic that made you stop, as well as any other topics that you would like to hear more about. And for now, let's get into remembering the point. Have you ever, and if you haven't, don't say so because then I'll feel really odd, but I'm assuming that you have you ever gone to the grocery store and sort of loaded up your cart, had a bunch of food, and you're sort of exhausted, you've been there forever, and then you're sort of walking and you suddenly have the thought, what was the point of coming here? And I remember that there was an actual reason why I came. And oh, yeah, it's because we're throwing a party this weekend and I needed to get some soda. But once you got into the grocery store, you sort of lost touch with the original reason of sort of the impetus or the trigger or the motivation that caused you to be there in the first place. And then once you can remember, and hopefully you remember, if not, you need to start writing stuff down. But if you do, and when you do remember what the point of being there was, then you can sort of get back on track, right? Right yourself and sort of take care of the things that you came there to do in the first place. And that way, when you leave the grocery store, you actually feel successful. Even though you've picked up all that other stuff that maybe you didn't mean to, you did go with a goal and an intention. And thankfully, you remembered what those were, accomplished that before leaving. And so it sort of makes us feel good when we actually do the things that we've planned and wanted to do. So today we're going to be talking about sort of the same thing that happens in relationships and in the workplace, where you sort of get into that relationship or into that workplace and you're into the day-to-day dealings and, just like in the grocery store, sort of something catches your attention, or you really like this, or you really don't like this. You sort of go down these different tangents. And at some point, maybe you lose touch with what the point was. And that leads us right into the first question of, when I first came into this relationship or this workplace, what had I hoped would be the role of this relationship or this workplace? How did I envision or desire for this to fit into the big picture of my life? My guess is, and it may not be true, certainly, my guess is that when you entered into this relationship or this workplace, it wasn't with the thought, oh, I hope that this thing contributes to my life by giving me a lot more stress, or giving me something to really worry about, or that I'm hoping that this workplace is someplace that will make me feel really small and unimportant. And so chances are that you did not enter into that relationship or that workplace with any of those sort of intentions, but rather you probably entered into that relationship with the hope that it would contribute to your life, love and companionship, additional joy, and someone you could grow old with, that person would be your peer or your equal in intelligence and decision-making. So those are all pretty reasonable and normal, expected, typical reasons why people would sort of welcome a relationship into their life. Similarly, with a workplace, that it would be pretty typical for someone to think, oh, I want to bring this workplace into my life because it will contribute not only money, which is maybe a big reason, money, prestige. This will be someplace that I can really expand and grow and reach my potential. So those are sort of all of the possible reasons why someone might welcome a certain workplace into their life. However, what often happens is that you are sort of in the midst of that relationship or in the midst of that workplace, and you sort of lose touch with that, right? Where, oh, I forgot that, by welcoming this relationship into my life, it was the hope that I would have somebody who was my equal, who would join with me in like life decisions. And instead, I find myself like overruling them or letting them overrule me. Like there's some kind of weird power difference in the relationship. Or, I was hoping that, I brought this relationship into my life so that I could feel love. But the things that I end up doing on a daily basis now are instead inspiring stress and worry from that person rather than inspiring love from them. So if you were to take a step back and remember, like, wait, what was the point when I welcomed this relationship into my life? What was I hoping would happen? How was I hoping that this would contribute to my life? Oh yeah, it was love and joy and companionship. What do I need to do to change my behaviors so that I can increase the possibility that, that will actually happen instead of engaging in behaviors that make sort of the opposite happen, right? And in the workplace, similarly, you sort of get into the day-to-day and all of a sudden you sort of realize like, oh, I have sort of set up a really icky situation for myself, right? Where maybe I'm a supervisor and I find myself sort of treating my direct reports really poorly. Maybe I'm not the type of leader that I hope to be. Oh, okay, let me think back to what was the point of me welcoming this workplace into my life. It was so that I could sort of reach my potential and grow and be better. And instead, what I find myself doing is sort of contracting and making myself sort of very one-dimensional, where now all it's, sort of my day-to-day decisions are all about what do I want, and I don't want to be influenced by other people. I don't want to be affected by other people. I'm just going to stay the way that I am always. And so I'm now preventing my growth. I'm preventing me from reaching my own potential. So if you were to take a step back, it could help you to reconnect with what your hope was and to get back on track. Question number 2 is closely related to question number 1. How had I hoped that I would contribute to this relationship or this workplace? Or another way of thinking of that might be, what role had I hoped that I would be playing in both of these types of settings? So chances are that it was something like, that in my relationship that I am a peer, I'm a nurturer, I'm a lover, sort of all of these types of characteristics. Basically, the wish is sort of like that I hope that I become the ideal or more ideal version of myself in this relationship, that I want my partner to experience sort of all of the desirable aspects of me. And in the workplace, maybe you went into that workplace with the initial thought of like, I'm going to be a visionary. I'm going to inspire people. I'm going to be a peer and a leader. And again, attain my potential, sort of be closer to my ideal version in this workplace. So then somewhere along the line, things change, right? Just like at the grocery, you didn't mean to get bag of marshmallows, but you just happen to grab them. In the workplace, same thing happens. So, you sort of get into habits, you get drawn into certain patterns of behavior or patterns of interaction. And next thing you know, you're sort of a tyrant, or you're a yes person, or you're the workhorse. And people maybe don't like working with you, or they do like working with you because you always end up doing all of the work. Your opinion never gets out there. Instead, you put all of your effort into supporting other people's opinions, that sort of thing, right? Like all of a sudden you find yourself sort of not being closer to your ideal. If anything, maybe you've even moved further away than you were before you even started that job. And that kind of really, really stinks. So if you were like today, if you were to take a step back, think about your current workplace and think back to like, what had been my hopes for this workplace? How had I hoped that I would contribute? What role did I think I would play here? Okay, am I on track? No, I'm not on track. If I'm not on track, what are the things that I can be doing differently in order to move myself back on track? And in the relationship, same thing. If you're in a relationship right now, to think about, at the beginning of this relationship, this is how I had hoped to contribute to the relationship. Am I doing those things? Maybe I'm doing some of those things. I'm really falling short on a bunch of those though. And okay, let me get myself back on track. What are the things that I need to do in order to be more like that, right? And so like one of the common patterns that happens in relationships is that one partner will sort of take on more of a parental role where they're like bossy, they're sort of making the choices and sort of override their partner. And the partner can take on more of like a teenage role where they are very reactive and defensive, start hiding things, like not sharing their feelings and just like rebelling, right? And feeling very resentful. So they've fallen into this pattern. I would say that neither of those people probably, can't ever say 100%, but I'm guessing that probably neither of those people had that intention when they entered into that relationship. And that if they were to take a step back and look at the role that they're playing, they would not be happy and they would not want to be playing that role anymore. They don't want to be the parent. They don't want to be the kid. And invariably, a response that I will get when I sort of call that out is, well, I have to act like this because of the way my partner acts. In any relationship, whether it's in the workplace or, romantic relationships, it's sort of a system, right? Like both of you are feeding into the system, and the system will never change unless one of you changes your behavior. And it may be you, it may be your partner, but for you to sort of expect your partner to make the first move or to be the first one to make themselves vulnerable or to make a change or to make a courageous step, it's not really reasonable, right? Because you have the most influence over yourself and you can self-manage yourself. Oh my gosh. You can manage yourself better than you can manage anybody else. And so for you to be able to expect changed behavior of you is very reasonable. For you to try to force other people to change their behavior is not really reasonable. And so you can change your behavior, get yourself back on track, change the system, and hopefully start to move that workplace, hopefully move those workplace interactions or that romantic relationship more into the direction that you had originally hope for. I'm hoping that this topic was helpful for many of you. And, whether you're thinking about it right now or if you think about it later on, you might even consider sort of writing both of those questions out of how am I hoping that I contribute to this relationship or this workplace? And how was I hoping that this relationship or this workplace would fit into my life? And once you come up with those answers, you could even write a couple of notes about what those answers are and just keep those somewhere visible so that every once in a while you can sort of remind yourself, sort of like at the grocery, right? Like I said, write it down if you're not remembering. So every once in a while, you'll just need to be reminded as to what the point was, and then you can get yourself back on track. So that's it for today's episode of Apples and Oranges. I'm Dr. Doug, and if you could, please comment down below what you thought about this video, as well as any other topics that you might be interested in hearing more about. Please like and subscribe so that you hear about the additional videos that I put out. And as usual, I'm just really, really appreciative of you being here. And whether we are interacting down in that comment section, over on Instagram, or even here in my office, I am just really looking forward to creating something with you that brings clarity, connection, and hope. Until next time.